Let's talk hockey now. The Avalanche have the most points so far in the league. Today, Colorado making a move to bolster their roster. Avs trading for Nicholas Roy in exchange for a conditional first-round pick in 2027 and a conditional fifth-rounder in 2026. Center spent a majority of his career with the Vegas Golden Knights, helping them win the Cup in 2023 out in the desert. I think our guy Todd Fuhrman might have been there to watch it all go down. Todd joining us here with NHL teams that need to make a move at the trade deadline, which is tomorrow, Friday at 3 Eastern. Let's start with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Speaking of this deal here, Todd, what position is Toronto in here ahead of the deadline?
Sell, and then sell some more if they have any suitors out there, Tommy, for a lot of their expiring assets. You mentioned the deal for Nicholas Roy. He was part of the sign and trade deal that allowed the Vegas Golden Knights to add Mitchell Marner this offseason. That's paid dividends. And Roy is going to contribute as a member of the Colorado Avalanche, probably supplanting Jack Drury along that third line. But I don't think that's the only move that the Maple Leafs are going to make. They're already holding out players for roster maintenance. We saw them go with a little bit of a shell roster last night in a 4-3 overtime shootout loss against the New Jersey Devils. I would expect that Scott Laughton, Bobby McCann, and Oliver Ekman-Larsson all find themselves in different spots by the time we get to the trade deadline. Look, the Leafs are in a very difficult position. They're going to have to go through a full retooling, and I'm not sure it's as simple as moving these guys, hoping they can get some draft capital. They may have some very hard decisions to make around some of their superstars as well, if they think that Austin Matthews, William Nylander, and Jonathan Tavares are going to be the players to carry them forward, knowing the bridge between them and everyone else in the Atlantic is starting to close. You have Tampa on one end of the spectrum. The Panthers will be back, and teams like the Red Wings, the Sabres, and company that aren't going anywhere. If anything, they're on the ascent.
It's interesting because they've had about a decade of success. They're about to snap the longest active playoff appearance streak in the NHL, dating back to 2016. But speaking of 2016, the Red Wings haven't been there since then. So the 9-season drought right up there with one of the longest here. So I'm guessing they're a buyer this time.
They were the gold standard for years, Tommy. Growing up watching the NHL, you could set your watch by the Detroit Red Wings being included in the NHL postseason. But gone are the days of Stevie Yzerman, Sergei Fedorov, Nicholas Lidstrom out there making a difference in May and June. Instead, Stevie Y has been tasked with trying to get this team back to the postseason. And you mentioned how long this drought has lasted. They have yet to play a meaningful playoff game since moving over to Little Caesars Arena from the iconic Joe Louis. And I think this is the year they have to push their chips in a bit and be aggressive in doing so. You look at their goal differential, not exactly great or indicative of a playoff team, but they've been accumulating draft capital and some of the young players that Stevie Y can no longer prospect hound. He's got to go out there and try and find a difference maker. I'd love to see Detroit throw their hat in the ring and try and land a marquee player in a center, whether it's Robert Thomas from the St. Louis Blues or going in a different direction. This team needs a little bit more punch offensively. Dylan Larkin is a nice 1C. He's not a superstar in my opinion, but they are extremely thin up the middle. And if the Red Wings are able to make some noise in the postseason, they have to try and add a little bit of additional firepower. Hopefully for them, though, they'll have John Gibson back. He did miss last game against the Vegas Golden Knights dealing with an upper body injury, but in my opinion, it's not something that's going to sideline him long. I think Stevie Y has to be aggressive and try and add a little firepower at the center position and be willing to overpay if he's able to do so.
So if we're going to stay in nostalgia city, let's get to the Sabres, where I grew up knowing Pat LaFontaine, Alexander Mogilny, Dominik Hasek. I don't think they've been good since Ryan Miller was the netminder for them here. But, Toddy, they have an opportunity to maybe bolster their roster and make a run here.
And this is a Sabres team who can bring back the nostalgia. Tommy, all I ask is they don't bring back those hideous black and red sweaters. Instead, sticking with the more iconic blue and gold that we see them wear. But the Sabres have been one of the more remarkable stories this season. And while it was a nice Cinderella campaign early on that Lindy Ruff had them going, there's a lot of optimism that this team in an Eastern Conference that has two clear-cut favorites in the Carolina Hurricanes and Tampa Bay Lightning is going to offer some opportunity for a team to make some noise. And why not the Buffalo Sabres, who are starting to realize some of the fruits of their labor from the youth movement that they've employed. You look at what Tage Thompson has done, not only as a member of Team USA helping win a gold medal, but being a goal-scoring force up front. Rasmus Dahlin on that blue line has been a true stalwart, capable of logging 25 to 30 minutes if needed. The problem for the Sabres is they thought they had their big trade deadline acquisition, getting Colton Parayko from the St. Louis Blues. Colton Parayko, however, had different ideas, exercising his no movement clause, so it puts the Sabres back out there. But I do think they need some depth on the blue line, and maybe they continue to explore some of the other players on that St. Louis Blues roster. Justin Falk isn't the same kind of difference maker, but he does give them depth and a little bit of veteran experience, some playoff mettle. This is a Sabres team that I think needs to solidify from the back end out. We'll see what direction Lindy Ruff goes in when it comes to naming a starting goalie for the postseason. If it's going to be Alex Lyon or potentially Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, but I like what the Sabres have going offensively. I just like to see him add another blue liner or two, preferably a right shot defenseman that could log some high leverage minutes when the games mean more, starting at game 83.
Yeah, those black, white, and red sweaters were awful that Miroslav Satan, Michael Pekka had to wear. That's right up there with like the Pistons teal, by the way.
Those might be as bad as the venting you used to see on the San Jose Sharks jerseys when they were trying to tinker with some of their uniform combinations as well.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, let's get to the Kraken. Can't be nostalgic about a franchise that's only been around for a handful of years, but they do represent the new school, much like Vegas, being successful right out the gates. What's the sense of the Seattle Kraken right now, Todd?
This is a team that's been extremely conservative when it comes to trying to land big pieces, whether it's in the offseason or at the trade deadline. And I think somewhere along the way, rubber has to meet the road. And for a Kraken team that's a little bit surprising to be in this position amid the struggles of most notably the Los Angeles Kings in the Pacific Division, that Seattle needs some more scoring punch. You look at this roster from top to bottom, and they have exactly one player with 20-plus goals and one player that has more than 40 points this year, and it's the same guy in Jordan Eberle. This is a roster for me, Tommy, largely comprised of guys that are middle six. I don't think they have true, clear-cut number one unit by any stretch of the imagination. Shane Wright hasn't been that guy, and they've kind of dangled him out there as a trade chip for some of these teams that are rebuilding. But I'd love to see them be aggressive and go after a couple of guys on the St. Louis Blues if they're able to land one of them. Maybe it's a Robert Thomas. We'll see if St. Louis wants to move him. I mean, he's under contract till 2030, 2031 at a very favorable AAV with the salary cap continuing to increase. But even a guy like Jordan Kyrou could give them a little bit more scoring punch up front. And you look at a lot of the forward-facing models from a playoff expectation standpoint, there's a reason that the Seattle Kraken are given a sub 40% opportunity to try and get into the postseason. It's a relatively difficult schedule by Pacific Division standards, and I'm not sure they can continue to rely on above-average goaltending like they're getting from Joey Daccord and Philip Grubauer. So I'd like to see Seattle's front office finally push their chips in a bit and add a little bit of firepower to allow them to have some offense up front, something that they've desperately lacked even after signing guys like Brandon Montour on the back end and Chandler Stevenson over the last couple of off seasons.
Todd, as you know, I've got Jacqueline D'Agostino with me, diehard Panthers fan. We just saw what the elbow room looked like after Team USA and certainly won. Are we going to see similar celebrations for this Panther team trying to go for a three-peat?
Why are you saying that, Tommy?
Look, guys, I grew up in Chicago, and when you grow up in Chicago, I wasn't a Cubs fan. You always knew that Cubs fans were going to say, wait till next year. And I think that's got to be the mantra that the Florida Panthers have to adopt. They have nothing to apologize for with back-to-back Stanley Cups, getting to the Stanley Cup Final, coming up short against the Golden Knights. But this isn't a young roster, and it's a roster that's logged a lot of high-leverage hockey over the last couple of years before you even factor in the Olympics. I know there was some optimism about Sasha Barkov returning if Florida could use him, but Paul Maurice kind of dampened those expectations, saying late March at the earliest. I'm not sure you rush Seth Jones back. Maybe you shut down Brad Marchand. Matthew Tkachuk has looked like a shell of himself coming back from that lower body injury. The problem for the Panthers, they should be sellers, but I'm not really sure what they have to sell. Maybe A.J. Greer commands a price as an unrestricted free agent, but the name to watch that I think would be fascinating if the Panthers went in this direction to see what the market looked like for Sergei Bobrovsky. He's on an expiring deal as well. We know about his playoff pedigree. Maybe a team wants to come in and bring in that level of veteran experience. The Panthers believe that they landed their goaltender of the future in Daniil Tarasov, who will get to start tonight against his former team in the Blue Jackets. So Sergei Bobrovsky would be one of those guys. It wouldn't shock me if they dealt him, but it would be fascinating to see if you could get a team to overpay for a Stanley Cup goalie with a little bit of pedigree, who I just don't know if he'll factor into the Florida Panthers' plans going forward in 2027 and beyond.
Well, I completely understand and agree. Makes me a little sick to my stomach. I think about all the great times that I've had screaming Bob at the top of my lungs and coming into work and not being able to talk, Todd, because I just love Bob. That's my guy, you know, but It is what it is. All great things come to an end.
The craziest part about it is Florida Panthers fans were clamoring that this was one of the worst deals ever signed. When you look at what the average annual value was for Bob when he got the long-term deal, when they lured him out of Columbus, suddenly that deal looks to be tremendous with 2 Stanley Cup rings on his resume. That what was going out of style in terms of overpaying for goalies really paid dividends when you saw him play his best when the Panthers really needed it. So to your point, all good things have to come to an end, but don't be sad that it's over. Be happy that it happened, and we'll see if Bob is a potential surprise name on the move before the deadline.
Guys, I'm going to cry. Like, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it, but, you know, back-to-back Stanley Cups.
Still got that.
I can't complain.
Not at all. Todd, certainly appreciate it. Thanks for hopping on the show to talk some hockey as we anticipate maybe some more action ahead of the deadline. Here's the shortest odds to win the Cup. The Avalanche are betting favorites. I can tell you the Wild, which at 17-1 right now, the biggest jump. They were 40-1 preseason. Now they're 6th best to lift Lord Stanley's Cup.